4.5 billion years. That's how long our planet has existed without asking for our permission. Right now, as you settle into this moment, you're experiencing something extraordinary that most people never truly grasp. You're alive during the briefest flicker of cosmic time when one species dared to believe it ruled everything. But what happens when that belief crumbles? What remains when we discover we're not the crown jewel of creation, but merely visitors passing through? Tonight, we're diving into a revelation that will shift how you see your place in existence forever. This isn't about making you feel small or insignificant. This journey leads somewhere far more profound than that. We're about to explore why discovering our temporary status might be the most liberating truth you'll ever encounter. Welcome to a space where deep questions meet gentle discovery. If you're seeking content that challenges your perspective while soothing your mind, you've found your sanctuary. Consider subscribing to join others who crave thoughtful exploration delivered with care. Your support helps this peaceful corner of curiosity reach fellow seekers who need exactly this type of contemplative journey. Right now, beneath your feet, lies a world that has witnessed transformations beyond imagination. Every grain of sand, every drop of water, every breath of air carries stories from eons when our species didn't exist. The ground supporting you has supported countless other forms of life, each believing in their own permanence, each eventually returning to dust. We live under a collective delusion that everything leading up to this moment was preparation for our grand entrance. Trees grew for us to build homes, rivers flowed to carry our ships, mountains rose to provide our minerals. Even the stars seem positioned perfectly for our navigation. But strip away this narcissistic lens, and a different story emerges entirely. Consider this. If Earth's entire timeline became a single year, multicellular organisms wouldn't appear until October. Complex life forms arrive in November. Dinosaurs dominate December. Mammals emerge on December 26th. The first humans don't show up until 11:58 p.m. on New Year's Eve. All of recorded civilization happens in the final 30 seconds before midnight. Agriculture, writing, cities, technology, space exploration compressed into mere heartbeats. Yet somehow we convinced ourselves that those billions of preceding years were just the opening act. We treat our brief appearance as the main event, the purpose toward which all previous existence was building. This perspective reveals more about human psychology than cosmic reality. Long before mammals took their first breath, trilobites ruled ocean floors for nearly 300 million years. These segmented creatures developed complex eyes, sophisticated social behaviors, and diverse ecological strategies. They thrived across multiple mass extinctions, adapting and evolving while continents drifted into unrecognizable configurations. Their reign lasted 60 times longer than mammals have even existed. During the Carboniferous period, vast forests stretched across supercontinent landscapes. Towering trees created oxygen-rich atmospheres, where dragonflies grew wingspans exceeding modern eagles. These ancient woodlands laid foundations for coal deposits we still mine today. No mammals witnessed their majesty. No primates swung from their branches. These ecosystems flourished completely independent of any pathway leading to us. When dinosaurs finally claimed terrestrial dominance, they did so with spectacular success. For over 160 million years, these reptiles filled every conceivable ecological niche. Some grew larger than buildings. Others developed flight before any mammal thought possible. Many exhibited complex social behaviors, built elaborate nests, and demonstrated intelligence that challenges our preconceptions. Their world was complete without requiring human approval or participation. Then came the asteroid. 66 million years ago, a space rock 6 miles wide slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula, with force equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons. Within hours, the age of dinosaurs ended. Not because they were evolutionary failures, but because catastrophe doesn't discriminate based on success or sophistication. This cosmic impact cleared ecological space for mammalian expansion. Our distant ancestors survived not through superiority but through circumstances beyond anyone's control. Small size, underground habits, and dietary flexibility proved advantageous when larger specialists perished. We exist because random destruction created opportunity, not because evolution was steering toward human development. Understanding this removes tremendous pressure from our shoulders. If we're accidental rather than inevitable, if we represent one experimental branch rather than evolution's ultimate goal, then our responsibility shifts dramatically. We don't need to justify our existence as the universe's crowning achievement. We don't carry obligation to fulfill some predetermined cosmic purpose. Instead, we become free to simply be present within our allocated time. Like every species before us, we get our turn to experience consciousness, to explore possibilities, to leave whatever marks we can before passing the stage to whatever comes next. This temporal limitation doesn't diminish our importance. It contextualizes it within something infinitely grander than individual human concerns. Mountains older than complex life still rise toward skies that have witnessed countless extinctions. Oceans that cradled the first cells continue their patient circulation patterns. Elements forged inside dying stars billions of years ago now compose your body, temporarily organized into the pattern you call yourself. When that organization dissolves, those same atoms will join new configurations, supporting different forms of awareness we cannot imagine. Your thoughts happening right now are patterns of electrical activity in neural networks that evolved over millions of years. The words you're processing were shaped by cultures spanning millennia. The device delivering this content represents accumulated knowledge from countless human generations. Yet all of this complexity exists within a cosmic moment so brief it barely registers on geological timescales. This perspective doesn't make your experience meaningless. It makes meaning itself more precious because of its transience. Every emotion you feel, every relationship you cherish, every moment of beauty or understanding or connection becomes infinitely valuable, precisely because it won't last forever. Temporary doesn't mean trivial. Brief doesn't mean insignificant. We are temporary custodians of consciousness, brief carriers of the universe's ability to know itself. That role brings profound responsibility, without crushing permanence. We get to participate in the ongoing story of cosmic development without needing to write its conclusion. Stone remembers what silicon chips forget. While we obsess over preserving our digital footprints, trilobite fossils continue telling their stories after 500 million years of patience. Our servers crash, our clouds evaporate, our databases corrupt, but sedimentary layers keep perfect records of creatures we never knew existed. This ancient archive doesn't care about our achievements, because it operates on timescales that make human civilization look like morning mist. When our concrete crumbles and our satellites fall, when our languages fade and our technologies rust into unrecognizable fragments, the geological record will continue accumulating new chapters. Future archaeologists might discover thin layers marking our brief industrial experiment, but they'll also find evidence of countless other experiments that came before us, each thinking they were the main characters in their own planetary drama. Maybe surrendering to this impermanence brings unexpected relief. Every species that ever lived eventually stepped aside, creating opportunities for something entirely different to flourish. When massive ferns retreated, flowering plants seized their chance to paint landscapes with colors beyond imagination. When dinosaurs vacated their ecological thrones, small mammals emerged from shadows to inherit kingdoms they never dreamed possible. Each ending became a beginning, each extinction an invitation for innovation. Should humanity vanish tomorrow, the planetary story wouldn't pause in mourning. Within decades, vegetation would reclaim our cities. Vines would wrap around skyscrapers until they collapsed into green mounds. Wolves might hunt in Times Square. Whales could multiply in oceans free from shipping lanes. Intelligence itself might eventually resurface in forms we cannot fathom, perhaps in octopus cities beneath warming seas, or in corvid communities with communication systems surpassing human complexity. This continuation doesn't diminish our significance. It contextualizes our contribution within something magnificently larger than individual human concerns. We've influenced atmospheric chemistry, reshaped continents, carried other species across oceans, and filled space with radio signals that will propagate long after their creators disappear. Being temporary doesn't erase impact, it makes impact more precious because nothing lasts forever. Consider our planet's true origin story, beginning long before any possibility of witnessing eyes. Picture Earth as a newborn world 4.5 billion years ago, not the blue marble of astronaut photographs, but a hellish sphere of molten fury. Imagine endless volcanic eruptions painting skies with toxic gases, asteroids and comets bombarding surfaces that hardened only to be shattered again by the next celestial collision. Scientists named this primordial era the Hadean Eon, borrowing from mythology's underworld, because early Earth genuinely resembled a realm of perpetual torment. No solid ground persisted for long, no atmosphere supported breathing, no oceans existed to reflect sunlight. Only fire, rock, and cosmic violence defined this alien landscape that somehow became our home. Yet from this apparent chaos emerged the foundation for everything that followed. Gradually, bombardments decreased, temperatures dropped, and something miraculous began happening. Water vapor released by countless volcanic eruptions started condensing into rain. Comets delivered additional moisture, frozen during their long journeys from the outer solar system. Drop by drop, storm by storm, century after century, these torrential downpours accumulated in the cooling planet's basins. Envision those first oceans forming through rainfall that continued for geological ages. No waves broke on shores because no life existed to witness them. No tides stirred coastal waters because no moon yet hung in proper orbital relationship. These primordial seas were essentially enormous chemistry experiments, mixing dissolved minerals under conditions that would kill any modern organism instantly. Within those sterile waters, something unprecedented occurred. Somewhere, somehow, molecules organized themselves into self-replicating patterns. We still debate exactly how this molecular revolution began, but its consequences transformed everything. The first microbes appeared, invisible to any hypothetical observer, lacking nervous systems, possessing nothing resembling consciousness, yet carrying within their microscopic boundaries the spark that would eventually illuminate the entire cosmos with awareness. These original Earth inhabitants deserve recognition as the planet's most successful life forms. While we measure our tenure in thousands of years, bacteria have dominated for billions. They've survived every mass extinction, adapted to every environmental catastrophe, and continue thriving in conditions that would instantly destroy human explorers. From superheated volcanic vents to Antarctica's frozen valleys, from highly radioactive zones to the crushing depths of oceanic trenches, microbial communities persist where complex organisms cannot even dream of surviving. For 3 billion years, longer than complex life has existed, bacteria ruled absolutely. During this unimaginable span, they accomplished feats that dwarf human technological achievements. They invented photosynthesis, transforming sunlight into chemical energy. They developed sophisticated chemical communication networks. They created the oxygen we breathe by fundamentally altering planetary atmospheric composition. This atmospheric transformation represents one of history's most dramatic environmental changes. Early Earth's air contained no free oxygen, just methane, ammonia, carbon dioxide, and other gases lethal to most modern organisms. When cyanobacteria began releasing oxygen as metabolic waste, this initially poisoned many existing life forms while simultaneously creating opportunities for new evolutionary experiments. The Great Oxidation Event poisoned ancient ecosystems while preparing conditions for everything that followed. Iron dissolved in oceans reacted with this new oxygen, creating distinctive red-striped rock formations still visible across continents. Only after millions of years did atmospheric oxygen accumulate enough to support more complex cellular machinery. During these formative eras, continents bore no resemblance to modern geography. Land masses drifted freely, colliding and separating in slow-motion dances that created mountain ranges now completely eroded away. Volcanic activity exceeded anything experienced during human timescales. Lightning storms raged across skies tinted with sulfurous yellows and methane blues. Standing on early Earth would have meant confronting landscapes of breathtaking hostility, barren rocky islands scattered across endless toxic seas, volcanic gases creating auroras of impossible colors, thunder echoing off mountains that would rise and fall millions of times before humans took their first steps. Yet beneath those sterile waves, invisible revolutions were reshaping the planet's future potential. These microbial pioneers accomplished their world-changing work without consciousness, planning, or intention. They simply existed, reproduced, and adapted to whatever conditions surrounded them. Their success came not through intelligence but through flexibility, patience, and profound resilience. They survived by fitting into planetary rhythms rather than trying to control them. This ancient perspective reveals how recently intelligence emerged as an evolutionary strategy. For most of Earth's history, survival depended on chemical efficiency, environmental adaptability, and reproductive persistence. Qualities bacteria perfected long before brains developed. If longevity indicates evolutionary success, then microbes remain the undisputed champions. Having outlasted every other life form while continuing to shape global systems we're only beginning to understand. Recognizing microbial dominance humbles human pretensions about intelligence representing evolution's ultimate goal. Perhaps consciousness is simply another temporary experiment, interesting but not necessarily permanent. The organisms that preceded us, didn't know they were preparing the stage for later performers. They just played their parts in the ongoing cosmic drama, exactly as we're doing now. Silence dominated the planet for eons beyond human comprehension. No bird calls pierced morning air, no leaves whispered secrets to passing breezes, no animal footsteps disturbed ancient shorelines. Only wind carved its signature across barren landscapes, while waves lapped at empty coasts. Volcanic eruptions punctuated this quietude with thunderous roars, but even these dramatic moments couldn't mask the fundamental truth. Life existed almost entirely below the threshold of visibility, carrying out revolutionary transformations through sheer microscopic persistence. This extended quietude reveals something profound about planetary timescales. What we perceive as eternal exists as mere flashes within Earth's vast memory. Our entire civilization represents less time than it takes mountains to rise or continents to drift significantly. Yet, in those immeasurable eons when nothing larger than bacteria inhabited this world, foundations were being laid for every magnificent life form that would follow. Transport yourself backward to those primordial ages when oceans teemed with invisible multitudes. No forests crowned the continents, no creatures swam in recognizable forms, no complex ecosystems painted the seafloor with diversity. Instead, microscopic entities conducted the most important biological experiments in planetary history, developing strategies that remain unmatched for durability and environmental mastery. These primordial organisms arrived roughly 3.5 billion years ago, establishing dynasties that dwarf human achievements in both longevity and global influence. To appreciate their temporal dominance, compress Earth's entire history into 12 months. Microbes emerge in early March, establishing their reign while the planet remains completely devoid of anything we'd recognize as familiar life. Meanwhile, humans appear only during the final seconds of December 31st, making our presence statistically insignificant within the broader biological timeline. Two major groups pioneered this invisible empire: bacteria and archaea. These domains of life developed survival strategies so sophisticated that modern science continues discovering new capabilities within their seemingly simple structures. Some species extracted energy from dissolved minerals, others from chemical reactions near scalding underwater vents, while certain pioneering lineages learned to harness sunlight directly through photosynthesis, an innovation that ultimately transformed the entire planet. What makes microbes truly remarkable isn't just their longevity, but their incredible adaptability. Unlike complex organisms requiring specific temperature ranges, oxygen levels, and environmental conditions, these microscopic survivors colonize virtually every habitat imaginable. They flourish in boiling springs that would instantly cook human flesh, multiply within frozen Antarctic valleys where nothing else can survive, and thrive in acidic pools caustic enough to dissolve metal. Their greatest planetary transformation occurred through atmospheric engineering on a scale that makes human climate modification look trivial. For billions of years, Earth's atmosphere contained virtually no free oxygen. Then cyanobacteria evolved the ability to split water molecules using solar energy, releasing oxygen as metabolic waste. This innovation triggered one of history's most dramatic environmental shifts, fundamentally altering planetary chemistry while creating conditions necessary for all subsequent complex life. Initially, this oxygen release constituted a catastrophic pollution event, poisoning countless organisms adapted to oxygen-free environments. Entire ecosystems collapsed as atmospheric composition shifted toward conditions lethal to anaerobic species. Yet survivors that could tolerate or utilize this reactive gas gained access to far more efficient energy production methods, setting evolutionary stages for larger, more complex cellular architectures. Scientists term this transformation the Great Oxygenation Event, recognizing it as perhaps the most consequential biological revolution in planetary history. Invisible organisms, lacking consciousness or planning ability, accidentally rewrote the chemical rules governing all future life. Every breath you take, every complex thought you think, every technological achievement humanity has accomplished depends entirely on this ancient microbial accident. Their influence extends far beyond atmospheric modification. Modern estimates suggest microbial populations reach numbers requiring scientific notation, approximately 10 circumflex 30 individual organisms currently inhabiting Earth's diverse environments. This means microbes outnumber stars in the observable universe, while outweighing all animals combined by factors of hundreds or thousands. These microscopic entities colonize every conceivable habitat, from deep oceanic trenches, where crushing pressures would flatten complex organisms instantly, to highly radioactive zones, where DNA-damaging radiation levels exceed anything multicellular life could survive. They inhabit your digestive system, processing nutrients, regulating immune responses, and influencing neurochemical balances in ways scientists are still discovering. Consider the profound implications. Even during our supposed age of humanity, we remain utterly dependent on microbial partners for basic survival functions. Without bacterial communities in your gut, food digestion would become impossible. Plants couldn't extract essential nutrients from soil without mycorrhizal fungal networks. Entire ecosystems would collapse if microbial decomposers stopped recycling organic matter into forms usable by other organisms. This dependency reveals the illusory nature of human dominance. While we imagine ourselves as planetary controllers, microbes continue managing the fundamental processes that sustain all higher life forms. They represent the true infrastructure upon which every ecosystem depends, operating with efficiency and reliability that surpasses any human-designed system. Measuring success through longevity rather than complexity, bacteria and archaea have already achieved evolutionary victory. Species like ourselves may flourish briefly before vanishing, but these microscopic survivors have weathered every major catastrophe. Earth has experienced asteroid impacts, ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, continental rearrangements, and atmospheric transformations that would eliminate most complex organisms entirely. Their survival strategies emphasize adaptability over specialization, flexibility over rigid requirements. Rather than building elaborate structures or developing complex behaviors, they perfected the art of existing within planetary rhythms instead of fighting against them. This approach has proven far more durable than intelligence, technology, or any other trait we consider advantageous. Complex life itself emerged through microbial collaboration rather than competition. Leading scientific theories propose that nucleated cells originated when one microbe engulfed another, creating partnerships instead of predation. The engulfed organism became mitochondria, cellular powerhouses that enable every complex life form's energy production. This endosymbiotic event represents the foundation upon which all multicellular existence depends. Every heartbeat, every neural firing pattern, every conscious thought relies on these ancient microbial partnerships embedded within your cellular architecture. You are literally constructed from collaborative microbial communities, making human claims of independence or superiority biologically absurd. Most of Earth's living biomass remains microbial despite billions of years of complex life evolution. Walking through forests, we notice towering trees, diverse animal species, and intricate ecological relationships. Yet beneath our feet lies invisible networks of microbial life that outnumber, outweigh, and ultimately sustain everything visible above ground. This underground empire operates the crucial biochemical cycles that maintain planetary habitability. Soil microbes process organic matter, fix atmospheric nitrogen, and create nutrient forms accessible to plants. Without their continuous labor, terrestrial ecosystems would cease functioning within decades. Zooming out to cosmic perspectives, the microbial age dominates Earth's biological timeline far more extensively than any other era ever will. Human civilization might earn brief mentions in future geological records, but microbes will command entire chapters spanning billions of years. They arrived first, proved their staying power through countless challenges, and will undoubtedly persist long after our species joins the fossil record. Perhaps this represents natural order, rather than cosmic oversight. These invisible monarchs earned their planetary dominance through 3 billion years of continuous adaptation, innovation, and persistence. They require no recognition, possess no awareness of their ruling status, yet continue governing fundamental life processes with unmatched reliability. When humanity eventually fades, as all species inevitably do, microbes will decompose our monuments, recycle our remains, and resume their patient work of sustaining whatever life forms emerge next. They are the ancient foundation, the persistent rulers, and the assured future of biological activity on this planet. Picture yourself witnessing Earth's transformation from a world of endless grey monotony into something recognizable as home. Standing on ancient shorelines, you'd encounter landscapes that would challenge every assumption about what natural means. No emerald meadows stretched toward horizons, no towering trees provided shade, no flowering gardens painted hillsides with vibrant colors. Only exposed rock formations, barren mineral deposits, and thin bacterial films clinging to moisture-rich surfaces dominated the terrestrial realm. The atmosphere itself would feel alien against your skin, thinner than modern air, lacking the oxygen richness we consider normal, carrying chemical signatures from ongoing geological processes. Climate patterns swung between brutal extremes without forest cover to moderate temperature fluctuations or stabilize weather systems. This was a planet poised on the threshold of revolutionary change, waiting for life to claim territories beyond aquatic boundaries. Gradually, pioneering organisms began their patient conquest of dry land. Simple moss-like entities took those first crucial steps, hugging close to soil surfaces, while developing strategies for surviving outside water's protective embrace. These biological pioneers possessed remarkable innovations. Specialized structures for absorbing moisture directly from air, protective coatings against ultraviolet radiation, and root systems capable of extracting nutrients from raw rock substrates. Over millions of years, plant evolution accelerated through increasingly sophisticated adaptations. Stems developed internal transport systems for moving water and nutrients across greater distances. Leaves evolved complex architectures for maximizing photosynthetic efficiency while minimizing water loss. Root networks expanded deeper and broader, breaking down geological formations while creating soil matrices that would support entire ecosystems. This botanical revolution triggered cascading transformations across planetary systems. Formerly barren landscapes erupted with greenery as vegetation spread across continents like biological wildfire. Rocky coastlines disappeared beneath pioneering forests. Mountain slopes gained living carpets that fundamentally altered erosion patterns. Most dramatically, atmospheric oxygen levels began climbing toward concentrations unprecedented in Earth's history. Plants function as sophisticated molecular factories, converting atmospheric carbon dioxide into complex organic compounds while releasing oxygen as metabolic waste. A single mature tree processes thousands of pounds of carbon dioxide annually while generating enough oxygen to support multiple human lives. Multiply this impact across millions of acres of emerging forests, and you've created planetary-scale atmospheric engineering that dwarfs any human technological achievement. The first great forest systems emerged during Devonian and Carboniferous periods over 300 million years ago. These weren't familiar woodland environments populated by oaks, maples, or pines, but alien landscapes dominated by towering tree ferns, massive horsetail relatives, and bizarre plant species with no modern descendants. Their enormous trunks rose from swampy foundations while their canopies created entirely new ecological zones high above ground level. These ancient forests supported ecosystems, unlike anything existing today. Underneath their dense canopies, insect species evolved to enormous proportions in oxygen-enriched environments. Dragonflies developed wingspans exceeding modern hawks, while millipedes grew longer than adult humans. Amphibians hunted through undergrowth, while early reptiles began experimenting with terrestrial lifestyles made possible by abundant atmospheric oxygen. Beyond supporting diverse communities, these primordial forests performed another crucial planetary service: carbon sequestration on geological timescales. When forest plants died, swampy conditions prevented complete decomposition, burying vast quantities of organic material in sedimentary layers. Over millions of years, geological pressure and heat transformed this buried vegetation into coal, petroleum, and natural gas deposits. This creates profound connections between ancient ecosystems and modern civilization. Every gallon of gasoline burned, every kilowatt of coal-generated electricity consumed, every plastic product manufactured taps energy originally captured by photosynthesis in forests that flourished before dinosaurs existed. Our industrial society literally runs on fossilized sunlight harvested by plants hundreds of millions of years ago. During peak Carboniferous periods, atmospheric oxygen concentrations may have exceeded 30% compared to today's 21%. This oxygen surplus enabled biological experiments impossible under current atmospheric conditions. Giant insects flourished because their primitive respiratory systems could access abundant oxygen for powering large body sizes. Ecosystems achieved complexity levels that supported intricate food webs, spanning multiple trophic levels. These oxygen-rich environments generated entirely new ecological relationships. Plants provided foundation energy that supported herbivorous consumers, which in turn fed carnivorous species, while decomposer organisms recycled nutrients back into soil systems. For the first time in planetary history, terrestrial soundscapes included rustling leaves, insect choruses, amphibian calls, and other biological acoustics that replaced the previous silence of barren landscapes. Earth had learned to breathe through forest systems, fundamentally altering planetary chemistry while creating conditions necessary for all subsequent complex life forms. However, this transformation illustrates another crucial principle about planetary change. Even revolutionary innovations remain temporary within geological timescales. Those first magnificent forests eventually succumbed to changing environmental conditions, climatic shifts, and evolutionary pressures. Many dominant Carboniferous plant species vanished completely, replaced by entirely different botanical lineages, better adapted to new ecological circumstances. While forests as ecological concepts persisted, specific species compositions changed repeatedly as extinction events cleared space for innovative life forms. This pattern continues today as climate change, habitat destruction, and human activities threaten current forest systems. Tropical rainforests, boreal woodlands, temperate, deciduous forests, all represent temporary configurations within ongoing ecological evolution. They feel ancient from human perspectives, but geological timescales reveal their ephemeral nature relative to planetary processes. Even atmospheric oxygen levels remain subject to biological and geological forces, rather than existing as fixed planetary constants. Photosynthetic organisms produce oxygen, while respiration, decomposition, and chemical weathering consume it. If this delicate balance shifts significantly, atmospheric composition could change dramatically, as it has repeatedly throughout Earth's history. This perspective contextualizes human environmental impact within broader patterns of planetary change. While our species has undeniably altered global systems, plants accomplished far more dramatic atmospheric engineering during their initial terrestrial colonization. Microbes created Earth's first breathable atmosphere, plants generated the second version, and we're currently modifying the third iteration. The crucial difference lies in awareness and intention. Ancient microbes and plants transformed planetary conditions without conscious planning, while humans recognize our environmental influence. Yet knowledge doesn't guarantee permanence or immunity from natural processes that govern all life forms. Understanding extinction as evolution's primary mechanism, rather than exceptional failure, helps contextualize human vulnerability within broader biological patterns. Over 99% of all species that ever existed have vanished from Earth's systems. Every trilobite that dominated ancient seafloors, every enormous Carboniferous insect, every towering prehistoric tree, every mighty dinosaur, all relegated to fossil records, while new life forms claimed their ecological territories. This isn't biological failure, but natural progression. Extinction clears evolutionary space for innovative adaptations, ensuring life continues exploring new possibilities, rather than remaining locked in static configurations. Sometimes extinction occurs gradually through environmental changes. Other times catastrophic events eliminate entire ecosystems instantaneously. Either way, endings create beginnings in life's continuous process of planetary experimentation. Consider trilobites, among Earth's most successful animal groups, thriving for nearly 300 million years across diverse marine environments. Thousands of species adapted to virtually every oceanic niche imaginable, developing sophisticated compound eyes, complex behaviors, and remarkable diversity. Yet, during the Permian extinction event, these incredibly successful organisms vanished completely, demonstrating that evolutionary success provides no immunity from planetary change processes. No trilobite lineage survived that apocalyptic transition. Yet as these ancient masters vanished from Earth's story, emerging groups seized vacant ecological territories with remarkable speed. Early crustaceans and pioneering insects rapidly colonized habitats previously dominated by trilobite communities, demonstrating life's extraordinary capacity for renewal, even after devastating losses. The Permian extinction represents Earth's closest approach to complete biological collapse. Scientists call this catastrophe the Great Dying for good reason. Approximately 250 million years ago, catastrophic events nearly terminated the entire planetary experiment with complex life. Massive volcanic eruptions in regions now called Siberia released enormous quantities of greenhouse gases, triggering runaway climate disruption that fundamentally altered global conditions. Oceans became lethally acidic, while atmospheric temperatures soared beyond tolerance levels for most existing species. Marine ecosystems crashed as over 90% of oceanic life forms perished. Terrestrial environments fared somewhat better, but still lost roughly 70% of land-dwelling species. This extinction event eliminated more biodiversity than any other crisis in planetary history, bringing life closer to complete annihilation than ever before or since. Yet even this near-total devastation couldn't extinguish the biological spark. From catastrophic destruction emerged unprecedented opportunities for evolutionary innovation. The extinction that ended Permian ecosystems simultaneously created conditions that enabled dinosaur ascendancy. Without the Great Dying clearing evolutionary space, reptilian lineages might never have achieved their legendary dominance over terrestrial environments. Dinosaur success illustrates extinction's role as transformation rather than termination. Catastrophic endings become revolutionary beginnings, closing familiar chapters while opening entirely different narratives. This pattern repeats throughout planetary history. Each major extinction creates space for radically different life forms to experiment with novel survival strategies. Following Permian devastation, Earth entered a period of biological experimentation resembling evolutionary chaos. Surviving species rapidly diversified into vacant ecological niches, while entirely new groups emerged from the devastation. Reptilian lineages proved especially adaptable during this transitional era, developing body plans and behaviors that would eventually support unprecedented terrestrial dominance. Among these experimental reptilian groups, archosaurs distinguished themselves through superior engineering solutions. Unlike sprawling legged ancestors, archosaur limbs positioned directly beneath their bodies, providing enhanced speed, endurance, and efficiency. This seemingly minor anatomical innovation granted enormous advantages during competitive struggles for post-extinction territories. Over millions of years, archosaur descendants gradually outcompeted alternative reptilian experiments. By the time Triassic landscapes transitioned into Jurassic environments, dinosaurs had established uncontested dominance over terrestrial ecosystems. Their reign would continue for over 150 million years, a temporal span so vast that human civilization represents less than 1% of dinosaur evolutionary success. Entering dinosaur-dominated worlds would overwhelm human sensibilities with alien magnificence. Herbivorous giants sporting necks longer than city buses browsed primitive conifer forests, while predators exceeding modern truck dimensions stalked their prey through cycad-studded plains. Aerial domains belonged to pterosaurs, whose leathery wings carried them across continents, while marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs ruled oceanic territories with streamlined efficiency. This represented genuine reptilian planetary dominance extending across all major environmental zones. Dinosaurs didn't merely occupy terrestrial habitats. Their relatives conquered skies and seas as well, creating the most successful vertebrate empire in Earth's history. No subsequent group has achieved comparable ecological breadth or temporal persistence. Dinosaur success stemmed from remarkable diversity, rather than simple gigantism. While popular imagination focuses on massive species, countless dinosaur lineages remained chicken-sized throughout their evolutionary history. Some developed sophisticated social behaviors, traveling in vast herds across seasonal migration routes. Others pioneered feathered integuments millions of years before flight evolution, using these structures for temperature regulation and communication displays. Their adaptability enabled occupation of virtually every conceivable ecological role. Tiny insectivores darted through undergrowth, while enormous herbivores shaped entire plant communities through selective browsing pressure. Sophisticated predators developed pack-hunting strategies while solitary giants relied on massive size for territorial dominance. Some species built elaborate nests for offspring care, while others developed complex courtship rituals involving colorful displays and vocal communication. Evidence suggests dinosaur societies exhibited behavioral complexity, rivaling modern animal communities. Fossilized nesting sites reveal parental care patterns spanning extended developmental periods. Trackway evidence indicates sophisticated herd structures with protective formations around vulnerable juveniles. Bone beds suggest mass mortality events affecting coordinated social groups rather than random individual deaths. Throughout their extensive reign, dinosaurs weathered numerous environmental challenges that eliminated less adaptable species. Continental positions shifted dramatically, oceanic circulation patterns changed repeatedly, and climate systems oscillated between greenhouse and icehouse conditions. Yet dinosaur lineages persistently adapted to these changes, maintaining ecological dominance through flexibility rather than rigid specialization. Their resilience extended through multiple smaller extinction events that devastated contemporary species. While competitors succumbed to environmental pressures, dinosaurs evolved new forms suited to changing conditions. This adaptability, combined with their temporal persistence, establishes dinosaurs as among the most successful large organisms in planetary history. Then, After dominating Earth far longer than any human society could dream of lasting, their age ended with shocking suddenness. 66 million years ago, a cosmic accident, an asteroid perhaps 6 miles across, struck the Yucatan Peninsula with force equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons detonated simultaneously. The impact generated immediate devastation, extending thousands of miles from the collision site. Massive earthquakes triggered tsunamis that swept across continental margins. Superheated debris launched into space fell back to Earth as a global rain of molten rock, igniting worldwide wildfires. Most critically, dust and debris blocked sunlight for months or years, collapsing photosynthetic food webs that supported entire ecosystems. Plants withered in perpetual twilight, eliminating primary production that sustained herbivorous species. Without plant-eating species, carnivorous dinosaurs lost their prey bases. Within a relatively brief geological period, non-avian dinosaur lineages vanished from terrestrial environments they had ruled for over 150 million years. Yet extinction never represents complete erasure. Modern birds descend directly from small feathered dinosaur ancestors that survived the impact catastrophe. In evolutionary terms, dinosaurs never truly disappeared. They transformed. Avian descendants continue dinosaurian lineages through different body plans adapted to post-impact environmental conditions. This transition illustrates how catastrophic endings enable evolutionary innovations. The asteroid impact that terminated non-avian dinosaurs simultaneously created opportunities for mammalian radiation. Small, generalized mammals that survived in ecological shadows suddenly inherited vacant territories formerly controlled by reptilian giants. Dinosaur extinction provides crucial perspective on human permanence prospects. If ecological dominance guaranteed survival, dinosaurs would still rule terrestrial environments. They possessed size, strength, diversity, behavioral complexity, and proven resilience across vast temporal spans. Their success exceeded any achievement human civilization might claim. Yet random catastrophe ended their reign. Despite these advantages, an asteroid impact, pure cosmic accident, eliminated lineages that had thrived through countless previous environmental challenges. This demonstrates how external forces beyond any species' control can terminate even the most successful evolutionary experiments. If dinosaurs, with their incredible diversity and temporal persistence, proved ultimately vulnerable to extinction, human claims of permanent dominance appear remarkably naive. Our technological capabilities, while impressive within human contexts, provide limited protection against cosmic catastrophes, supervolcanic eruptions, or other planetary-scale disasters that have repeatedly reshaped life's trajectory. The dinosaur example doesn't counsel despair but rather realistic humility about human permanence. Every species, regardless of current success, remains subject to forces beyond their control. Recognition of this vulnerability creates opportunities for wisdom rather than arrogance in our relationship with planetary systems that will outlast any individual evolutionary experiment. Dinosaur extinction created opportunity, rather than merely ending one evolutionary chapter. Without that cosmic catastrophe eliminating reptilian giants, mammalian lineages might have remained forever confined to ecological shadows, never expanding beyond their modest niches as tiny nocturnal survivors. Asteroid impact cleared vast territories that mammals subsequently claimed, establishing foundations for primate evolution and eventually human emergence. This interconnectedness reveals how current human existence depends entirely on previous species' disappearance. We literally owe our evolutionary opportunity to random cosmic violence that terminated dinosaur dominance 66 million years ago. Their loss became our ancestral gain through processes completely beyond any organism's control or planning. Future species will likely benefit similarly from whatever circumstances eventually eliminate human civilization. When our chapter concludes, vacant ecological spaces will invite entirely different evolutionary experiments we cannot imagine. Some descendant organisms might incorporate traces of human influence into their development, just as birds preserve dinosaurian heritage through modified body plans adapted for post-catastrophe environments. While dinosaurs commanded global attention through their imposing presence and thunderous movements, an entirely different group of creatures pursued survival through opposite strategies. These mammals remained deliberately inconspicuous throughout the Mesozoic era, maintaining small body sizes and avoiding direct competition with dominant reptilian species. Their patient approach to persistence would eventually prove far more durable than impressive size or territorial dominance. Mammalian origins trace back over 200 million years to early Triassic environments. where tiny proto-mammals coexisted with emerging dinosaur ancestors. These pioneers rarely exceeded mouse dimensions, resembling modern shrews or opossums in their modest proportions and secretive lifestyles. They survived by occupying marginal niches, ignored by larger competitors, hunting insects, scavenging scraps, and sheltering in burrows where massive predators couldn't follow. Smallness represented strategic wisdom, rather than evolutionary limitation during this era. Being overlooked meant avoiding predation by creatures whose jaws could snap bus-sized prey in half. Mammals perfected the art of invisible survival, thriving precisely because they posed no threat to established power structures. What distinguished early mammals wasn't size but sophisticated biological innovations. They developed endothermic metabolism, enabling internal temperature regulation independent of environmental conditions. This thermal independence granted activity during cooler periods, when cold-blooded reptiles became sluggish. Fur provided additional insulation, while mammary glands supplied offspring with nutrient-rich milk during vulnerable developmental stages. These adaptations didn't create immediate dominance, but rather enhanced survival probability across diverse conditions. Mammals could remain active during temperature extremes that immobilized reptilian competitors. They could exploit nocturnal hunting opportunities unavailable to vision-dependent predators. Most importantly, they could reproduce successfully in environments too harsh for reptilian egg-laying strategies. Throughout 150 million years of dinosaur rule, mammals slowly diversified without challenging established hierarchies. Some lineages specialized in burrowing, creating underground networks that provided protection from surface predators and climate fluctuations. Others adapted for arboreal lifestyles, developing climbing abilities that opened three-dimensional habitat zones. Aquatic species explored freshwater environments, while others perfected grassland navigation techniques. This gradual diversification occurred entirely within constraints imposed by reptilian dominance. Mammals remained ecological bit players, filling gaps rather than claiming starring roles. Yet this apparent limitation actually strengthened their evolutionary foundations by forcing adaptation to challenging circumstances that larger, more specialized species couldn't tolerate. Mammalian brain development represented another subtle but crucial innovation. Relative to body size, mammalian brains exceeded reptilian proportions while supporting enhanced sensory processing capabilities. Improved hearing and smell compensated for size disadvantages by providing early warning systems against approaching threats. These neurological improvements laid groundwork for future cognitive developments that would eventually transform planetary dynamics. Then cosmic catastrophe reshuffled evolutionary opportunities completely. Asteroid impact eliminated dinosaur giants, while creating survival challenges ideally suited to mammalian capabilities. Smaller species required less food during post-impact resource scarcity. Their ability to shelter underground protected them from initial devastation and subsequent environmental instability. Rapid reproductive cycles enabled quick population recovery once conditions stabilized. Advantages that seemed modest during dinosaur dominance became decisive factors during recovery periods. Mammals inherited empty territories previously controlled by vastly superior competitors, transforming from marginal survivors into ecological inheritors practically overnight. Their long apprenticeship in harsh conditions prepared them perfectly for post-catastrophe opportunities. Mammalian radiation following dinosaur extinction demonstrates evolution's capacity for explosive diversification when environmental constraints disappear. Within relatively brief geological timeframes, mammalian lineages expanded into ecological roles previously monopolized by reptilian species. Some grew enormous, evolving into whale ancestors, elephant precursors, and massive herbivorous giants. Others maintained smaller sizes while developing sophisticated behavioral adaptations. This diversification eventually produced primate ancestors, whose forest-dwelling lifestyles emphasized vision, manual dexterity, and social cooperation. Millions of years later, environmental changes forced some primate populations out of shrinking woodlands and onto expanding grasslands, where different survival strategies became necessary. Early human ancestors emerged from this transitional process as remarkably vulnerable creatures. Unlike their mammalian contemporaries, hominins possessed no impressive physical weapons, no sharp claws, armored hides, or intimidating size. They survived through intelligence rather than strength, developing tool use and social cooperation as primary survival strategies. Stone tool creation marked humanity's first technological revolution. While other animals occasionally used found objects as implements, Human ancestors began deliberately shaping materials for specific purposes. Sharp edges improved meat processing efficiency, while pointed tools enhanced hunting capabilities. These modifications seem primitive by modern standards, but they represented fundamental shifts from passive environmental adaptation toward active environmental manipulation. Fire control amplified human capabilities exponentially. Evidence suggests controlled fire use dates back several 100,000 years, transforming human ecology in multiple ways. Fire provided protection from nocturnal predators, extended useful daylight hours, and enabled food preparation that unlocked additional nutritional value from raw materials. Cooking proved especially revolutionary because it made previously indigestible plants edible while improving protein extraction from meat sources. This nutritional enhancement supported larger brain development, creating positive feedback loops where improved cognition enabled more sophisticated fire management techniques. Fire also transformed social dynamics by creating gathering points where communities could share food, exchange information, and develop cultural traditions. Evening assemblies around controlled flames became venues for storytelling, skill transmission, and social bonding that strengthened group cohesion beyond what purely biological relationships could achieve. These innovations accumulated gradually rather than appearing suddenly. Human technological development required millions of years of incremental improvements before reaching configurations recognizable as distinctly human behavior patterns. Each advancement built upon previous achievements while creating possibilities for future innovations. Yet despite these remarkable developments, early humans remained incredibly fragile within their environmental contexts. They survived not through dominance but through adaptability, maintaining flexibility that enabled responses to changing conditions. Climate shifts, resource fluctuations, and predation pressure continuously challenged human populations while forcing continued innovation. Human success stemmed from combining mammalian survival strategies with unique cognitive capabilities, like their mammalian ancestors. Humans survived through persistence rather than overwhelming power. They maintained small group sizes, avoided direct confrontation with superior physical competitors, and exploited marginal resources ignored by other species. Intelligence became humanity's equivalent to mammalian endothermy, or reptilian size, a specialized adaptation providing advantages under specific circumstances, without guaranteeing permanent survival. Just as previous innovations eventually proved insufficient against changing conditions, human cognitive abilities may someday fail to provide adequate protection against environmental challenges. This perspective contextualizes human achievements within broader evolutionary patterns, rather than treating them as unprecedented exceptions to natural processes. We represent one experimental solution among countless others attempted throughout planetary history. Our current success reflects favorable circumstances rather than inherent superiority over alternative approaches. Understanding human origins as continuation of mammalian survival strategies, rather than revolutionary departure from natural history, provides essential humility about our ultimate permanence. We inherited patient persistence, adaptability, and resilience from ancestors who survived through flexibility rather than dominance. These qualities enabled our rise but cannot guarantee our indefinite continuation. Anthropologists propose that sophisticated language development accelerated around communal flames, where extended social interactions became possible. During those firelit gatherings, communication expanded beyond immediate survival needs toward abstract concepts, shared memories, and collaborative planning. Whether this theory proves accurate or not, controlled fire undeniably created temporal and social spaces that enabled cultural complexity previously impossible during purely nomadic existences. Language evolution represents another revolutionary breakthrough, comparable to fire mastery in its transformative power. Communication didn't emerge suddenly as complete grammatical systems, but developed gradually through gestures, vocalizations, and symbolic expressions that slowly coalesced into structured meaning-making tools. These early communication methods eventually developed flexibility and sophistication exceeding any other species' capabilities. With language came unprecedented ability to preserve and transmit knowledge beyond individual lifespans. Information could survive brain death by passing through community networks, creating cultural repositories that accumulated wisdom across generations. This represented the beginning of truly cumulative learning, where each generation built upon previous discoveries rather than starting from scratch with only genetic programming. These twin innovations, fire and language, fundamentally altered human survival prospects, while establishing foundations for everything that followed. Yet, these achievements emerged from incredibly precarious circumstances. Early human populations faced constant threats from predation, climate fluctuations, resource scarcity, and disease outbreaks. Many groups disappeared entirely, leaving no descendants or cultural legacies. Human evolutionary history contains multiple extinct branches that once possessed intelligence, tool-making abilities, and cultural sophistication comparable to our own ancestors. Neanderthals developed complex burial practices, created sophisticated hunting implements, and survived harsh ice age conditions for hundreds of thousands of years. Denisovans adapted to high-altitude environments while developing their own technological traditions. Other hominin species possessed unique innovations that enabled survival in challenging ecological niches. These disappeared human relatives remind us that intelligence provides no guarantees against extinction. Being human never represented inevitable evolutionary destiny but rather one experimental pathway among many possibilities. Multiple versions of humanity coexisted for extended periods before demographic, environmental, or competitive pressures eliminated all alternatives except our own lineage. Some extinct human populations interbred with surviving groups, contributing genetic material that persists within modern human populations. Others vanished completely, taking their cultural innovations and accumulated knowledge with them. Their disappearance demonstrates how easily human experiments can terminate, despite impressive achievements and apparent evolutionary success. Modern Homo sapiens emerged roughly 300,000 years ago, already possessing fire control, language capabilities, and sophisticated tool-making skills inherited from earlier hominin developments. These foundational technologies provided survival advantages that enabled expansion into diverse environments previously inaccessible to human occupation. Yet these early achievements might have appeared utterly mundane to contemporary observers. Small groups gathering around evening fires, sharing cooked food, exchanging information about hunting grounds, comforting frightened children. These simple activities contained seeds of revolutionary change without obvious dramatic significance. Nobody anticipated that such modest social innovations would eventually produce cities, writing systems, or space exploration programs. This ordinariness emphasizes how human advancement emerged through gradual accumulation of small advantages, rather than predetermined destiny toward technological dominance. Each innovation built upon previous discoveries, while creating possibilities for future developments that nobody could have predicted or planned. Cooperative behavior became essential for human survival, not through philosophical choice, but through practical necessity. Individual humans lacked physical capabilities required for successful competition with other large mammals. Fire maintenance required coordinated effort. Successful hunting demanded group strategies. Child rearing needed community support. Language strengthened these cooperative bonds while enabling more sophisticated collaborative activities. Human sociality developed from survival requirements, rather than innate preferences for companionship. We became social creatures because isolation meant death in environments filled with superior physical competitors. This biological heritage continues influencing modern human behavior despite radically changed environmental circumstances. Understanding these origins provides perspective on claims about human permanence or evolutionary culmination. Our species emerged from vulnerable beginnings through fortunate combinations of circumstances, innovations, and survival strategies. These same factors that enabled our rise remain subject to environmental pressures that could eliminate us as easily as they eliminated our hominin relatives. Fire can be extinguished, languages can disappear, cultures can collapse just as readily as they originally developed. The innovations that enabled human survival provide no permanent protection against extinction forces that continue operating throughout planetary history. Once fire and language established human foundations, cultural development began accelerating through cumulative technological improvements. For hundreds of thousands of years, change occurred gradually as tool modifications required millennia to spread across populations. However, innovation rates eventually increased dramatically as knowledge networks expanded and building opportunities multiplied. Stone tools evolved from simple choppers into specialized implements designed for specific tasks. Spear points attached to wooden shafts extended hunting range while reducing personal risk. Bow and arrow technology added precision and distance capabilities that further improved hunting success rates. Each innovation provided slight advantages that accumulated into significant survival improvements. Agriculture represented the most dramatic transformation in human history since fire control. Beginning approximately 10,000 years ago across multiple world regions, plant and animal domestication replaced hunting and gathering lifestyles with food production systems that supported much larger populations in permanent settlements. Agricultural surplus enabled population growth, occupational specialization, and social stratification previously impossible under nomadic conditions. Permanent settlements grew into towns, then cities, then urban centers supporting thousands of inhabitants engaged in diverse economic activities. With cities came walls, roads, marketplaces, and administrative systems managing increasingly complex social organizations. Writing systems transformed human knowledge preservation and transmission capabilities. Initially developed for record-keeping in early agricultural societies, writing eventually enabled literature, historical documentation, scientific treatises, and philosophical works that preserved cultural achievements across centuries. Knowledge became portable, permanent, and cumulative in ways previously impossible. Technological acceleration continued through metalworking, navigation improvements, and mechanical innovations that expanded human capabilities exponentially. Bronze, iron, and steel tools provided superior performance over stone implements. Ships enabled oceanic exploration while connecting distant populations through trade networks. Mathematical and scientific discoveries unlocked natural principles that enabled engineering applications. The Industrial Revolution represented another acceleration threshold, comparable to the agricultural revolution in its transformative impact. Steam power, mechanical production, and fossil fuel utilization created manufacturing capabilities that reshaped economic systems, social structures, and environmental relationships. Transportation revolution through railways and steamships compressed geographic distances while enabling unprecedented population movements. Electrical technology enabled communication revolutions through telegraphs, telephones, and radio systems that linked global populations instantaneously. Photography, motion pictures, and broadcasting created shared cultural experiences across vast distances. Urban environments expanded rapidly to accommodate industrial workers while rural populations declined proportionally. 20th century innovations compressed technological development timelines even further. Aviation progressed from initial flight experiments to intercontinental travel within decades. Space exploration achieved orbital flight and lunar landings within a single generation. Computer technology evolved from room-sized calculators to portable devices with processing power exceeding entire research institutions. This acceleration trajectory appears unprecedented in planetary history. No other species has modified environmental conditions, developed technological capabilities, or accumulated knowledge at comparable rates. Human innovations have reshaped atmospheric chemistry, altered continental landscapes, and influenced global climate patterns within timeframes representing mere moments in geological terms. However, acceleration also generates increasing risks alongside expanding capabilities. Technologies that enable human prosperity simultaneously create destruction potential exceeding natural disaster impacts. Nuclear weapons, climate modification, and ecosystem disruption demonstrate how human innovations can threaten species survival despite their intended benefits. Moreover, technological acceleration provides no exemption from extinction processes that eliminated previous dominant species. Dinosaurs ruled terrestrial environments for 150 million years without developing wheels, written language, or metal tools, yet succumbed to environmental changes beyond their adaptive capabilities. Mammalian persistence through patient survival strategies proved more durable than impressive size or ecological dominance. Our acceleration might represent remarkable achievement within human perspectives while remaining temporary experiment within planetary timescales. The same innovations that enabled rapid cultural development could facilitate equally rapid collapse if environmental conditions change beyond technological adaptation capabilities. Cities represent humanity's most visible planetary modifications, creating permanent alterations to surface geology, hydrology, and ecosystem structures. From ancient settlements like Jericho and Uruk to modern megacities supporting millions of inhabitants, urban development demonstrates human capacity for environmental transformation unprecedented among biological species. Urban concentration enabled occupational specialization that accelerated technological development while creating complex social hierarchies, managing diverse economic activities. Cities became centers for cultural innovation, scientific research, and artistic creation that preserved and transmitted human achievements across generations. Yet cities also represent human vulnerability, concentrated in locations dependent on complex supply networks, technological infrastructure, and stable environmental conditions. Urban populations require constant resource inputs from surrounding territories while generating waste products that can overwhelm local ecosystems. This dependency makes cities simultaneously symbols of human achievement and potential failure points during environmental disruptions. Cities emerged and vanished throughout human history, some leaving magnificent ruins that continue inspiring wonder thousands of years later, while others disappeared so completely that only faint archaeological traces hint at their former existence. Yet, despite countless individual failures, urban civilization as a concept persisted and expanded. Today, more than half of Earth's human population inhabits urban environments, whose artificial illumination creates a planetary glow visible from space, perhaps the most obvious signal that a single species has profoundly transformed this world. However, cities represent just one aspect of humanity's planetary signature. Our atmospheric modifications may prove even more enduring than architectural achievements. When humans began burning wood for warmth and later coal, petroleum, and natural gas for industrial power, atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations started shifting from their natural baseline. Initially, these changes remained nearly imperceptible, but as manufacturing expanded, transportation multiplied, and power generation spread globally, emission scales increased exponentially. Current atmospheric carbon dioxide levels exceed concentrations experienced for millions of years, directly linking human activities to ongoing climate transformations. Rising temperatures, melting glaciers, and shifting weather patterns all reflect our chemical fingerprint on planetary systems. No previous species has altered atmospheric composition so dramatically, creating a signature that future ice cores and sedimentary layers will preserve long after human civilization disappears. Our landscape modifications represent another permanent alteration. We clear forests for timber and agriculture, construct dams to control river flow, extract minerals through mountain mining, and carve transportation networks across continents. Satellite imagery reveals geometric field patterns, illuminated roadways, and scarred surfaces bearing unmistakably artificial characteristics. A planet once shaped exclusively through geological processes, plate tectonics and climatic forces, now shows extensive evidence of human engineering. Plastic materials epitomize this transformation. Created barely 1 century ago, plastic now exists everywhere, belling landfills, polluting oceans, accumulating in animal tissues, and settling into sedimentary deposits that will eventually become rock formations. Future geologists, should they exist, will identify plastic contamination as a distinctive stratigraphic marker, clearly indicating human presence in the geological record, persisting long after our cities crumble and machines rust into unrecognizable fragments. Agricultural systems have fundamentally restructured biological communities across vast territories. Domesticated crops like wheat, corn, and rice dominate areas that once supported diverse native ecosystems. Domesticated animals including cattle, pigs, and chickens exist in populations exceeding wild species by enormous margins. Earth's ecosystems have been systematically redesigned to serve human needs, creating a global network of simplified food production systems that sustain billions of people while reducing overall biodiversity. What makes these changes particularly remarkable is their extraordinary speed. Natural forest expansion or contraction previously required centuries. Climate systems shifted over millennia. Landscape evolution occurred gradually through erosion and tectonic processes. Yet, within mere thousands of years, humans have dramatically accelerated these transformations. Industrial civilization accomplished atmospheric alterations, continental reshaping, and global species redistribution within just a few centuries. This raises the fundamental question underlying our entire exploration: does creating such extensive planetary modifications guarantee permanence? Earth's history suggests otherwise. Trilobites dominated oceanic environments for hundreds of millions of years, while leaving extensive fossil evidence. Yet they vanished completely. Dinosaurs marked the planet through bones, trackways, and ecosystem modifications spanning over 150 million years before disappearing entirely. Their traces remain embedded in geological records, but their active reign terminated. Our signature may appear unprecedented in its clarity, but visibility doesn't ensure permanence. Evidence of human existence might persist through plastic contamination, carbon isotope signatures, and altered landscapes while the species responsible disappears entirely. The magnitude of our planetary changes might actually accelerate our decline by destabilizing climate systems, eliminating biodiversity, and overwhelming ecological support networks essential for long-term survival. Still, something undeniable characterizes how humans have inscribed themselves across Earth's surface. From orbital perspectives, city lights create constellation patterns across dark continents. From geological timescales, our carbon and chemical modifications will remain detectable signals. Our roads, dams, waste products and monuments represent markers of a species that progressed rapidly through technological development, while reshaping planetary conditions more extensively than any previous organism. Whether this makes us evolution's pinnacle or merely another temporary phase remains the persistent question throughout our investigation. Historical evidence strongly supports the latter interpretation. Our signature may appear bold within human perspectives, but it's written in the same book as every other species, subject to identical page-turning processes and inevitable change cycles that govern all biological experiments. The term Anthropocene has gained popularity recently, describing a proposed geological epoch where human activity becomes the primary force shaping planetary conditions. This concept suggests that through cities, industrial systems, carbon emissions and resource consumption, we have altered Earth so profoundly that we merit our own geological age designation. While this idea might flatter human significance, it potentially misleads us by reinforcing assumptions about our ultimate importance. Behind this terminology lies a subtle but powerful implication that humans represent the final chapter in Earth's evolutionary story, the culmination toward which all previous history was inevitably progressing. This perspective feels seductive given our apparent planetary dominance, but geological evidence tells a fundamentally different story about the nature of change and permanence. The Anthropocene illusion begins with scale misperception. Our environmental impact appears enormous compared to our ancestors' modest influence, leading to assumptions about unprecedented global significance. We've relocated mountains, redirected rivers, modified coastlines, and unlocked atomic energy night achievements that seem to dwarf previous species' capabilities. However, scale can deceive when viewed through limited temporal perspectives. Cyanobacteria flooding Earth's atmosphere with oxygen billions of years ago accomplished biosphere transformation exceeding any human achievement. Carboniferous forests altered planetary chemistry while creating coal deposits we continue exploiting. Dinosaurs dominated terrestrial environments for over 160 million years, transforming ecosystems on scales we can barely comprehend. Compared to these achievements, our few millennia of industrial activity represent brief scratches on the surface of deep time. The illusion also stems from immediacy bias. We experience contemporary changes within human lifespans, making current transformations feel monumentally final. When ice sheets retreat, forests disappear, or species become extinct, we sense irreversible conclusions. Yet within geological timescales, even centuries represent moments. The asteroid impact that eliminated dinosaurs rewrote planetary life more rapidly than usual. Earth rhythm cycles, demonstrating how quickly conditions can change regardless of previous stability. Pride underlies the Anthropocene concept by suggesting human uniqueness as a geological force, comparable to volcanism or plate tectonics. While we've indeed achieved unprecedented capabilities through fossil fuel combustion, satellite deployment, and lunar exploration, uniqueness doesn't guarantee permanence. Every dominant species possessed distinctive characteristics that enabled temporary success before environmental changes rendered their advantages insufficient for continued survival. Most problematically, the Anthropocene illusion reinforces beliefs about historical directionality, that everything preceding human emergence was preparation for our inevitable appearance. Earth's history demonstrates no directional progress, but rather constant change, adaptation, and cycling between different organizational states. The story consists of continuous resets, rising and falling eras, and experimental beginnings followed by inevitable endings. Human existence depends entirely on events unrelated to our species. Asteroid impact clearing dinosaur dominance opened mammalian expansion opportunities. Oxygen accumulation enabled complex life possibilities. Holocene climate stability provided agricultural development conditions. None of these represented planned progression toward humanity. They were accidents that created favorable circumstances we happened to exploit successfully. Understanding our place within ongoing planetary processes, rather than as their culmination, provides essential perspective on human permanence. We participate in Earth's continuing story without controlling its direction or guaranteeing our permanent role within future chapters. These convergences represented pure historical accidents rather than predetermined destiny, assuming that cosmic coincidences were designed specifically to produce humanity mistakes random chance for intentional purpose. We emerged from fortunate circumstances, not inevitable progression toward our particular form of intelligence. Yet the Anthropocene illusion maintains powerful psychological appeal because it reflects our immediate daily experience. When megacities illuminate night skies, when our carbon emissions demonstrably influence global weather patterns, when human presence extends into every conceivable terrestrial environment, it becomes difficult not to perceive ourselves as the story's natural climax. We appear everywhere, command unprecedented power, and seem inescapable from planetary systems. However, dinosaurs possessed identical characteristics during their reign, as did trilobites throughout their even longer dominance. Earth consistently humbles its temporarily dominant life forms without sentiment or mercy. This humbling doesn't diminish our current impact's significance. Ecosystems we alter, climate systems we destabilize, and extinctions we accelerate profoundly affect countless species and future possibilities. These consequences prove enormous within human historical scales, but they remain temporary within Earth's vastly larger temporal framework. 10 million years from now, regardless of human persistence or disappearance, the planet will have moved beyond our influence. New species will colonize vacant niches, fresh ecological systems will evolve, and different planetary rhythms will establish themselves. Our chapter, however dramatic it appears to us, will have dissolved into deep time memory. Perhaps the greatest danger within Anthropocene thinking involves the complacency it encourages. Viewing ourselves as history's final chapter might foster feelings of invulnerability, as though nothing could eliminate our species. But historical evidence contradicts such assumptions. Intelligence represents a remarkable adaptation, yet provides no immunity against asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, pandemic diseases, or consequences from our own choices. Alternative approaches to Anthropocene concepts emphasize responsibility over permanence. If we possess sufficient power to alter planetary systems, we simultaneously bear responsibility for resulting consequences. The illusion fades when we accept our chapter's temporary nature, while recognizing opportunities to influence how it unfolds. We can choose whether our legacy involves destruction or resilience, whether our planetary modifications deepen ecological harm or foster long-term survival. Viewing the Anthropocene clearly, without permanence illusions, reveals our place within a much grander narrative where we represent one consequential moment rather than the ultimate climax. When that moment passes, as all moments inevitably do, the story will continue developing without human participation or oversight. Dominance often appears solid and permanent while being experienced, creating illusions of lasting security among those who wield temporary power. Great cities, mighty nations, and sprawling empires seem unshakable during their peak influence. Their monuments dominate landscapes, their armies control territories, their cultural influence extends far beyond original boundaries. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates that dominance represents one of humanity's most fragile achievements. Every civilization, regardless of apparent invincibility, eventually fractures and falls. Mesopotamia, celebrated as civilization's cradle, pioneered urban development, writing systems, and large-scale agriculture. For centuries, city-states like Uruk and Babylon maintained seemingly impenetrable walls and eternal temples. Yet floods, droughts, invasions, and internal conflicts repeatedly weakened these foundations until mighty kingdoms crumbled into archaeological ruins. Egypt appeared immortal to its inhabitants, supported by Nile River reliability, providing food, trade networks, and governmental stability. Pharaonic dynasties endured for thousands of years, achieving longevity exceeding most other civilizations' complete lifespans. Nevertheless, Egypt eventually fragmented, absorbed by foreign powers, and transformed beyond recognition. Its monuments persist, but the culture that created them vanished completely. Rome exemplifies dominance illusions most dramatically. At its zenith, Roman Empire territory stretched across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Roman roads, aqueducts, and legal systems unified millions under centralized administration. Roman legions enforced imperial will, while Roman architecture permanently reshaped occupied landscapes. Roman culture seemed unstoppable. However, accumulated pressures gradually undermined imperial strength. Corruption, economic strain, Territorial overextension and repeated invasions eroded governmental effectiveness. Eventually, Rome split, weakened progressively, and collapsed entirely. Ruins remain visible, ideas echo through modern institutions, but the empire itself became historical memory. These examples reveal dominance's fundamental impermanence, despite contemporary appearances of solidity. Civilizations typically crumble under combined pressures from multiple sources. Environmental challenges include droughts, famines, and disease outbreaks. Political problems involve corruption, inequality, and social unrest. Military threats encompass invasions, uprisings, and resource conflicts. Usually these factors interweave into comprehensive fragility webs beneath impressive facades. Mayan civilization constructed vast forest cities featuring towering temples and sophisticated astronomical knowledge. For centuries they maintained thriving communities while creating remarkable art, architecture, and governance systems. Eventually, environmental stress from deforestation and prolonged drought combined with internal conflicts to unravel their social fabric. Great cities were abandoned to jungle reclamation. Similar patterns appear globally across temporal scales. Indus Valley civilization, technologically advanced for its era, disappeared through still debated combinations of climate shifts and river course changes. Ancestral Puebloan peoples built remarkable cliff dwellings before drought conditions forced abandonment and relocation. Small and large civilizations consistently rise with optimism and energy, develop internal contradictions over time, then collapse when accumulated stresses exceed adaptive capacity. Dominance fragility represents historical norm rather than exception. No system, regardless of technological sophistication, possesses immunity against collapse forces. This principle applies directly to contemporary global civilization, despite our unprecedented capabilities and apparent security. Modern dominance feels more secure than previous examples through instant global communication, cities exceeding historical nation sizes, medicine curing previously fatal diseases, aviation and satellite technologies, massive food production systems, river control projects, and landscape modification capabilities. Yet, great civilizations throughout history felt equally secure until security suddenly evaporated. Our vulnerabilities parallel historical precedents remarkably closely. Climate change threatens agricultural stability and social cohesion just as droughts weakened ancient societies. Political divisions, inequality, and corruption strain governmental institutions identically to Roman precedents. Regional conflicts and warfare destabilize territories through familiar mechanisms. Additionally, we face unprecedented threats unknown to previous civilizations, nuclear weapons, global pandemics, and technological risks beyond historical experience. Dominance ultimately remains fragile because it depends on delicate balances between human populations and environmental systems, governing authorities and citizen populations, expansion pressures and sustainability requirements. When balance breaks, structural cracks widen rapidly until even the strongest foundations fail. Civilizational collapse doesn't necessarily erase all achievements. Roman legal principles influenced European development for centuries afterward. Egyptian monuments inspired subsequent generations across millennia. Mesopotamian writing systems provided alphabetic foundations. One society's fall often clears space for successor developments, paralleling species extinction creating evolutionary opportunities. Nevertheless, recognizing dominance fragility should inspire humility regarding our permanent prospects. Skyscrapers, electrical grids, and internet networks may feel eternal, but pyramids, aqueducts, temples, and libraries seemed equally permanent to their builders. Time revealed that nothing constructed by human effort transcends eventual decay. Understanding dominance fragility reminds us that permanence represents psychological illusion rather than achievable reality. We aren't immune to forces that eliminated every previous civilization. We inhabit an era of abundance and global connection, but historical evidence suggests impermanence. Eventually, our cities may fall silent, monuments weather away, and complex systems unravel completely. Earth will continue its patient evolution, but human dominance will fade into geological memory like countless dominant species before us. Imagining post-human worlds often feels morbid, emphasizing absence and planetary silence. Yet shifting perspective from human concerns back to Earth's continuing story reveals transformation rather than termination. Our planet has witnessed countless eras emerge and disappear, numerous dominant species rise and fall. Throughout these transitions, Earth consistently healed, adapted, and renewed itself in ways surpassing any single species' imagination during their temporary reign. Should humanity vanish, Earth wouldn't pause in mourning. It would simply change, as it always has throughout deep time. Initial days and weeks following human disappearance would preserve eerie traces of sudden abandonment. Cities would stand empty while electrical grids gradually failed, leaving flickering lights to fade into darkness. Aircraft would remain grounded on silent runways, while automobiles sat motionless on deserted highways. Without human maintenance, power plants would automatically shut down, water systems would overflow or run dry, and buildings would begin their inevitable surrender to weather forces. Domestic animals and livestock would wander freely, or struggle for survival depending on their environmental circumstances. For a brief historical moment, the world would seem frozen in configurations we left behind, resembling a theatrical stage abandoned mid-performance by vanished actors. Yet healing processes would commence immediately. Plants would lead the reclamation effort as vegetation pushes through pavement cracks, vines creep up, building walls, grasses colonize empty spaces, and trees establish themselves in abandoned areas. Within mere decades, most urban environments would soften under expanding greenery. Without constant human clearing, forests would reclaim former agricultural lands while prairies spread across abandoned highway corridors and wetlands reform around demolished dam sites. Earth has always possessed readiness to cover human scars once developmental pressure disappears. Animal populations would rapidly expand into territories previously restricted by human activities. Wolves and bears would reclaim European and North American forests. Elephants would roam more freely across African and Asian landscapes without poaching threats or fence barriers, while deer, foxes and wild boars would thrive throughout abandoned suburban developments. Species pushed to ecological margins would expand again, filling niches previously dominated by human influence. Marine ecosystems would begin recovering from centuries of overfishing as fish populations rebound without commercial trawling, whales migrate without ship collisions or sonar disruption, and coral reefs potentially stabilize if atmospheric carbon levels eventually decline. Oceanic life consistently demonstrates rapid adaptation when environmental pressures lift, suggesting marine biodiversity would flourish again, given sufficient time and reduced human interference. Carbon rebalancing would require longer timeframes than biological recovery. Altered atmospheric composition wouldn't reset overnight, but regrowing forests on abandoned farmlands would absorb excess carbon dioxide while soils sequester additional amounts. Over centuries, planetary systems would gradually draw down accumulated atmospheric carbon through natural processes. Ice sheets might continue retreating, sea levels could continue rising, and climate patterns might keep shifting in the near term due to existing momentum. However, without continued fossil fuel combustion and forest clearance, new equilibrium states would eventually establish themselves as life adapts to changed conditions. Human monuments would prove temporary against geological forces. Glass towers would shatter from thermal stress, steel would rust through oxidation, and concrete would crumble under freeze-thaw cycles. Within a millennium, few modern structures would remain intact. Within tens of thousands of years, even the grandest urban centers would become buried ruins beneath accumulated soil and encroaching forests. Only the most durable constructions, stone monuments, underground tunnel systems, perhaps mountainside carvings, would persist as faint echoes of human civilization. Ironically, plastic materials might constitute our longest-lasting trace, embedded in sedimentary deposits while forming novel geological composites, detectable millions of years hence. Life would not merely return but diversify beyond current configurations. Evolution would continue generating new species while ecosystems develop increasing complexity. Birds might radiate into forms we cannot imagine. Mammals could evolve unprecedented traits, or perhaps surviving primate populations would develop enhanced intelligence over millions of years, repeating consciousness experiments through alternative pathways. Alternatively, entirely different lineages, cephalopods, insects, or reptiles, might discover routes toward ecological dominance. Future possibilities remain as open and surprising as the past has always proven. Recovery encompasses more than ecosystem restoration. It involves rebalancing fundamental planetary processes. Without industrial interference, rivers would meander back into historical channels, wetlands would expand naturally, and coastlines would shift according to geological forces. Mechanical noise would vanish, leaving soundscapes dominated by wind, water, and animal communications. Night skies would darken without artificial illumination, revealing stars as they appeared throughout most of Earth's history. Planetary rhythms would return to natural cycles governed by solar, lunar, tidal, and seasonal patterns rather than electrical grids or industrial schedules. This doesn't mean Earth would revert to some imagined pristine condition. Human traces would persist through altered climate systems, redistributed species, and distinctive geological layers. Invasive organisms we transported would continue inhabiting regions far from their origins, while domesticated animals might adapt into wild forms or gradually disappear. Mining scars and waste deposits might endure for millennia, but the overarching narrative would emphasize adaptation as life weaves around our remnants, while nature fills spaces we no longer occupy. Therefore, post-human worlds would prove abundant, rather than barren, quieter in technological terms, but louder in natural symphony. Forests would whisper through restored canopies, oceans would teem with recovering populations, and animals would roam expanded territories. This would represent a world healing itself, not through conscious intention, but through persistence, because Earth never required human presence for biological prosperity. Life existed for billions of years before us, and will continue for billions more after our disappearance. This perspective reframes human significance. Rather than viewing ourselves as planetary guardians, we recognize that Earth continues regardless of our presence. Our dominance represents a temporary phase, our influence a passing moment. When imagining humanity's end, one persistent question emerges: could something resembling us ever develop again? Not humans specifically, but comparable intelligence, reasoning, construction, communication, and environmental modification, through thought rather than instinct alone. Is intelligence a rare accident unlikely to repeat, or does it represent evolution's recurring solution to environmental challenges, appearing repeatedly until favorable conditions align? Understanding our own improbable path provides essential context. Human brains didn't emerge fully developed according to predetermined plans, but resulted from accumulated pressures, including climate shifts, cooperation requirements, communication benefits, and tool-making advantages. Intelligence represented gradual accumulation, rather than sudden leaps, millions of years of incremental changes, layering into something retrospectively extraordinary, while remaining just another evolutionary adaptation from Earth's perspective. Other species display intelligence fragments: corvids crafting tools and solving problems, octopuses demonstrating puzzle-solving abilities, dolphins maintaining complex communication systems, elephants showing memory and empathy. These examples prove intelligence isn't uniquely human, but exists across life's diversity. However, environmental and physiological constraints limit most species' intellectual development. Octopuses possess remarkable minds, but short lifespans that restrict cultural transmission. Corvids show cleverness yet lack body plans suitable for complex technology. Dolphins demonstrate social intelligence within oceanic environments that prevent fire usage, metallurgy, or construction projects. The crucial question isn't whether intelligence could reappear. It already exists in limited forms, but whether it could accumulate into world-shaping capabilities. Success would likely require similar conditions that enabled human development: social cooperation, environmental manipulation capacity, extended lifespans, and learning abilities. If humans disappeared, vacant ecological niches would create opportunities for species possessing social tendencies, environmental manipulation skills, long lifespans, and learning capacity. Primates might evolve enhanced intelligence again over millions of years, developing larger brains, sophisticated communication, and eventually culture. Alternatively, corvids freed from current population pressures might advance further. Cephalopods could develop extended lifespans, enabling social learning, or entirely unpredictable lineages might emerge. Life's history contains countless surprises: who predicted fish would colonize land and become mammals, or that small creatures hiding from dinosaurs would someday build rockets. Some argue intelligence was inevitable, given survival pressures favoring flexibility, environmental adaptation, and problem-solving capabilities. Others contend human-level intelligence represents a rare convergence unlikely to repeat, noting that life thrived for billions of years without it, while trilobites and dinosaurs achieved enormous success without language or cities. Truth likely falls between extremes. Basic intelligence appears common, but planet-reshaping capabilities may require rare combinations of cognitive capacity, manipulative bodies, cooperative environments, and sufficient lifespans for knowledge transmission. Should intelligence return, it would likely differ dramatically from human patterns. Alternative species might utilize resources we overlook, communicate through color patterns or gestures rather than speech, and create societies avoiding our architectural approaches. Intelligence need not follow human blueprints, but can manifest through countless forms shaped by different bodies and environments. This raises profound questions. Would emerging intelligence repeat human mistakes through resource depletion, climate alteration, and ecosystem dominance? Or would different pressures guide more balanced approaches, or perhaps equally destructive ones? Intelligence grants power that inevitably reshapes worlds, but specific outcomes depend on choices that wouldn't be ours to make. Human intelligence proved both gift and burden, enabling art, science, exploration, and connection, while also producing warfare, exploitation, and environmental collapse. Future intelligence would face similar dualities, carrying transformative potential alongside destructive capabilities. In Earth's continuing story, intelligence represents one recurring possibility among countless evolutionary experiments. Whether it emerges again, in what form, and with what consequences remains unwritten, waiting in the patient turning of deep time's pages. Evolution's potential second draft might emphasize entirely different characteristics than those that defined humanity. Perhaps empathy and cooperation would become central organizing principles, rather than competition and dominance. Maybe efficiency would guide development instead of endless expansion. Alternatively, similar cycles of rise and fall might repeat because intelligence invariably walks precarious lines between creation and destruction. The possibility of intelligence returning humbles claims about human uniqueness. While we remain the only species to achieve our particular combination of capabilities, uniqueness represents temporary status rather than permanent distinction. Ammonites once possessed unique evolutionary innovations. Trilobites dominated with unprecedented adaptations, and dinosaurs ruled through distinctive characteristics. Our uniqueness may represent merely another draft in evolution's endless series of experimental revisions. Could intelligence return? Honestly, yes, given sufficient time. But not in forms we imagine or recognize. Not another humanity or alternative version of ourselves, but something entirely different shaped by unique environmental pressures, historical circumstances, and chance convergences. This might occur in 10 million years, 50 million, or never at all. Earth possesses infinite patience, without hurrying toward predetermined outcomes. This patience makes the question endlessly fascinating. From deep time perspectives, our story appears brief, yet temporal vastness leaves room for countless experiments and infinite second drafts. Intelligence may rise again, not because it must, but because evolution continuously explores possibilities. Sometimes within those explorations, extraordinary developments happen. When imagining intelligence, we inevitably picture it resembling ourselves: hands manipulating tools, forward-facing eyes, voices carrying language. We envision thought processes mirroring our own, because human cognition represents our only direct reference point. However, if humanity vanished and alternative intelligence emerged, no reason exists to assume it would mirror human characteristics. Minds aren't bound to singular blueprints. Our thinking represents one version among countless possibilities. Consider octopus nervous systems distributed throughout their bodies with neurons located not just in heads but throughout their arms. When octopuses explore, they don't rely solely on central brains issuing commands but utilize arms acting with autonomous decision-making capabilities. This represents distributed intelligence where cognitive processes are shared across entire body structures. If such systems evolved further, what would consciousness feel like in beings that don't centralize thought but spread it throughout their anatomy? Would such minds experience individual selfhood as we understand it? Or would they perceive existence as fluid collective awareness encompassing all their parts? Birds offer additional insights. Corvids and parrots demonstrate remarkable problem-solving abilities, despite small but efficient brain structures tied to flight mechanics, three-dimensional navigation, and long-distance vocal communication. If avian intelligence expanded further, their cognition might ground itself in movement patterns, sound structures, and atmospheric dynamics rather than object manipulation. Their communication could resemble song-like systems woven with rhythm and pitch complexities beyond human comprehension. What we categorize as music might constitute the fundamental core of their thought processes, rather than decorative addition to them. Marine mammals present another trajectory. Dolphin and whale communication systems, though only partially understood, suggest remarkable complexity through clicks, whistles, and body language, creating meaning layers Their societies demonstrate sophisticated alliances, teaching methods, and cultural traditions. However, aquatic environments shape their minds in directions diverging dramatically from terrestrial intelligence. They don't control fire, carve stone, or manipulate metals. Their intelligence expresses itself through social and acoustic channels rather than material construction. Given evolutionary time, they might build entire conceptual worlds from sound and memory mental architectures existing within consciousness, rather than physical landscapes. These possibilities force confrontation with human limitations. We often equate intelligence with technology and visible progress indicators, including tools, buildings, and machines. This represents our cognitive bias rather than universal truth. Intelligence doesn't always manifest through external construction but can develop internal mental architectures instead. Whales may already carry epic narratives within their songs, oral histories exceeding any written records, passed through generations across centuries. Their intelligence may equal ours while differing completely in expression methods. Future minds might follow similar paths, creating intricate cultural systems, memory networks, and communication structures invisible to material observation. Intelligence might not always leave skyscrapers as evidence, but could produce traditions and social frameworks instead. Collective consciousness represents another possibility. Ant and bee colonies function as superorganisms, where individual members constitute parts of greater wholes. Decision-making emerges through interactions among thousands rather than singular leadership, suggesting intelligence could arise within groups rather than individuals. Such minds might experience reality as perpetual we, rather than individual I, thinking collectively in ways incomprehensible to humans. Plant communication through chemical signals, resource sharing via root networks, and environmental responsiveness hint at additional possibilities. While not conscious in human terms, distributed communication foundations and long-term adaptation mechanisms exist within botanical systems. Evolution might enhance these processes, creating future minds that neither move nor speak, but think through slow rhythms of growth, decay, and molecular exchange. Such beings might measure time in seasons rather than seconds, centuries instead of days. Environmental factors could shape radically alien forms of consciousness. Underground intelligence might evolve in permanent darkness, navigating through touch, vibration, or chemical gradients rather than vision. Thought processes in such beings might develop spatial awareness incomprehensible to site-dependent organisms. Deep ocean intelligence would adapt to constant pressure, light absence, and sensory modalities barely understood by humans. The crucial point emphasizes that no single pathway exists for thought development. Human cognition represents one outcome rather than the inevitable outcome. Alternative minds might think differently, experience emotions differently, even perceive reality through fundamentally different frameworks. They might lack language as we understand it, or possess communication forms transcending human capabilities. They might not value individuality or consider it absolutely essential. Time might appear linear, cyclical, or completely irrelevant to their experience. This reveals how narrow our perspective remains. We're so accustomed to human cognition that we assume it provides universal measurement standards. Imagine explaining human thought to future intelligence unlike ourselves, describing how we translate sounds into symbols, symbols into speech, speech into culture. To them it might appear as alien as their thought processes seem to us. The question of future minds focuses less on their existence probability and more on their complete differentiation from human patterns. Evolution never repeats exactly, but explores novel solutions each iteration. If intelligence appears again, it will likely manifest as something unpredictable, shaped by bodies, sensory capabilities, and environmental conditions unlike ours. This opens profound reflection. Perhaps minds already exist on Earth that we fail to recognize because they don't resemble human cognition. Perhaps whales carry complete epics we cannot fully comprehend. Perhaps forests maintain communication systems we dismiss. Perhaps we're surrounded by alternative forms of thinking, but cognitive bias blinds us to their existence. If true, the future doesn't need to invent new minds, but only allow existing ones to unfold and develop. When asking what future life might think like, we're really questioning how flexible intelligence can become. Evidence from cognitive variety already observable suggests far greater flexibility than we typically assume. Whether emerging from feathers, tentacles, fins, or roots, thought isn't bound to singular forms. Other kinds of minds may eventually fill the silence we leave behind, examining traces of human existence the way we study fossils, wondering what beings once inhabited these places and whether their thoughts bore any resemblance to their own. When measuring time, we use human reference points, minutes on clocks, years through birthdays, centuries via history books. We perceive time as something moving with us, because our lives provide the most familiar measurement scale. However, Earth operates on entirely different temporal frameworks, writing its story through stone layers, oceanic cycles, and atmospheric patterns. Understanding planetary timescales requires setting human perspectives aside, while listening to rhythms that preceded us by billions of years and will continue long after our disappearance. Stone carries the deepest temporal records through mountains rising and crumbling over spans so vast that entire civilizations witness only fragments of geological motion. Tectonic plates drift across planetary surfaces, colliding and separating through dances requiring tens of millions of years. Continents that appear fixed actually remain restless, their gradual movement shaping oceans, climates, and ecosystems beyond any species' control. Each cliff face or canyon wall functions as a temporal library, where individual layers record volcanic eruptions, ancient seas, fossilized forests, and vanished deserts. Oceans write time through current systems circulating globally, while redistributing heat and influencing weather patterns. Thermohaline circulation completes cycles requiring approximately 1,000 years as deep waters sink, surface waters rise, nutrients circulate, and life follows these extended rhythms. Coral reefs, seagrass meadows, and fisheries depend on patterns seemingly invisible because they move too slowly or broadly for daily human awareness. Celestial mechanics operate on scales exceeding human lifespans. Earth's axial precession requires about 26,000 years to complete full wobbles, shifting our stellar reference points. Planetary tilt changes over tens of thousands of years, driving ice ages and warming periods. Even orbital fluctuations alter regional sunlight distribution across geological timeframes. While night skies appear constant to human observation, Earth experiences shifting astronomical stages where stars move, constellations reconfigure, and galaxies drift through space. Measured against these scales, human temporal existence feels like brief flickering. Our recorded history spans merely thousands of years, instantaneous blinks in geological terms. Even our species' complete duration of 200 to 300,000 years appears brief compared to stone, ocean, and sky cycles. When building cities, writing literature, or creating music, we imagine permanence, yet on planetary timescales, we represent temporary marks washed away almost immediately upon creation. This doesn't diminish human significance, but contextualizes our place within narratives vastly exceeding individual human concerns. We participate in stories much grander than ourselves, contributing brief but meaningful chapters to Earth's continuing evolution, while accepting our temporary role within eternal planetary rhythms. The unfolding story spans billions of years, and will continue for billions more. Mountains we climb, seas we navigate, and stars we chart aren't mere backdrops for human drama, but characters possessing their own narrative arcs, moving to rhythms too gradual for complete human comprehension. Understanding Earth's temporal scale fundamentally shifts perspectives on human impact. When discussing climate change, we typically focus on decades or centuries, yet carbon we release now will influence atmospheric composition for thousands of years. Species we drive extinct will remain absent for millions of years. Mining and construction scars will persist in geological records long after our languages disappear entirely. Within human lifespans, these impacts feel monumentally vast. Within planetary scales, they represent just another stratigraphic layer, another chapter eventually buried and rewritten by subsequent geological processes. Stone, ocean, and sky demonstrate that change represents the only constant. Mountains rise through tectonic forces, but also erode through weathering. Oceans circulate globally while shifting with temperature and salinity variations. Stars traverse celestial paths while eventually fading and dying. Permanence constitutes illusion. Even at planetary scales, motion continuously reshapes Earth endlessly. This perspective can unsettle because it reveals human limitations and our minimal control over planetary processes. However, it can also ground us by demonstrating that we aren't separate from these cycles but embedded within them. Our bodies contain minerals forged inside ancient stars, water that circulated through oceans for billions of years, and air breathed by countless previous organisms. We participate in Earth's temporal scales, even when we don't consciously recognize this participation. This understanding suggests that intelligence itself, minus our brief experiment with consciousness, forms part of planetary timescales. We imagine our minds as unique, fleeting, and unanchored, but perhaps they represent another cyclical process, rising and falling like seas, emerging and fading like mountains, drifting like stars. If intelligence ends with humanity, it becomes another layer in geological records, another brief rhythm within larger symphonies. If it returns through alternative forms, it simply represents another variation of ongoing planetary processes, Earth experimenting with new evolutionary drafts across deep time. Recognizing stone, ocean, and sky as temporal frameworks requires accepting planetary patience. Earth isn't hurried. It has persisted for billions of years and will continue for billions more. Our urgency doesn't match its urgency. Our endings don't constitute its endings. This patience reshapes how we might understand ourselves. We exist briefly but remain aware enough to glimpse vast processes, even though we cannot live long enough to observe them completely. We measure plate movements, trace oceanic currents, chart stellar positions, and thereby glimpse the immensity of stories we're embedded within. Perhaps this represents one of intelligence's rare gifts, not mastering these timescales, but simply noticing them at all. When expanding perspective beyond Earth toward universal contexts, scales change so dramatically they become difficult to mentally encompass. Mountains that seemed eternal, oceans that appeared boundless, skies that felt endless all become tiny fragments within larger cosmic frameworks. Galaxies stretch across hundreds of thousands of light-years, while galaxy clusters drift through cosmic webs spanning billions of light-years. Within this context, our planet appears as a speck, and our species as a momentary fluctuation. The universe neither hurries nor pauses. Stars ignite, burn for millions or billions of years, then fade. Galaxies collide, merge, and reshape themselves. Black holes consume matter and light. These processes unfold vast and impersonally, continuing whether we exist to witness them or not. Imagining that the universe observes us represents metaphor rather than reality. It doesn't notice or care about human affairs. Yet placing ourselves against this cosmic backdrop transforms how we perceive our significance. Throughout most human history, skies provided both mystery and navigation. People looked upward, finding stories in constellations, guides for travel, calendars for agriculture. Stars integrated into culture, religion, and identity. We felt ourselves part of cosmos that communicated through celestial patterns. Only recently have we learned cosmic true enormity and apparent indifference to human narratives. Earth orbits an ordinary star among hundreds of billions within the Milky Way. The Milky Way itself represents one among trillions of galaxies. No center exists, no privileged vantage point, no special stage where human lives unfold. To the universe, we don't represent any story's climax, but one experiment among countless others. Yet within this indifference lies profound paradox. While the universe doesn't observe us, we observe it. We direct telescopes skyward, measure cosmic radiation, chart space expansion itself, and send probes beyond our solar system carrying cultural fragments, hoping someone might notice. The universe may ignore us, but through us it has become self-aware for the first time we know of. This awareness remains fragile. If humanity disappears, cosmos will continue without remembering us. Stars will burn, galaxies will spin, expansion will proceed. However, while we persist, we carry rare perspective. We know we exist on a small planet, orbiting a modest star within vast darkness. We know our lives are temporary, but we also know our thoughts enable vision beyond immediate circumstances. Cosmic context can feel humbling, even diminishing. What significance do cities, civilizations, or species possess against billions of light years? Yet it can also feel empowering because even though the universe doesn't watch, we possess capacity to notice, wonder, and reflect. We represent part of the universe examining itself, part of cosmos turning its gaze inward. This reframes questions about importance. Importance isn't distributed from stellar authorities but created by us. We decide what matters during our brief temporal windows. The universe doesn't need us, but we can choose to value connection, meaning, and curiosity. Our cosmic position isn't about centrality, but about awareness. Awareness may constitute one of the universe's rarest phenomena. Matter organizes into stars. Stars forge elements. Elements assemble into planets. And on at least one planet, those elements arranged into beings who wonder. This may have occurred elsewhere. Perhaps frequently. Perhaps never again. We cannot know yet, but that it happened here at all remains remarkable. While the universe may not watch us, we can watch it. In doing so, we weave ourselves into its narrative. Our time may be brief, our scale small, but awareness grants us placement that stone, ocean, and sky alone don't provide. In cosmic terms, we're fleeting. In human terms, we're meaningful. Holding both truths simultaneously challenges us to see ourselves clearly. When contemplating impermanence, it often feels like loss. We observe ruins of past civilizations and think of decline. We watch forest clearance or species disappearance and perceive tragedy. We confront our limited lifespans and feel weighted by endings. We long for permanence, despite nothing in nature ever being truly permanent. However, stepping back to view impermanence, not as failure, but as natural pattern begins revealing different understanding. Endings belong within stories, and impermanence gives stories their meaning. Consider a leaf growing from spring buds, spreading wide through summer, catching light, finally changing color, and falling. The falling isn't failure but part of cycles making trees possible. Without impermanence, no renewal would occur, no space for novelty would exist. This principle applies across all scales. Species rise and vanish, creating space for others. Continents drift and collide, building mountains that eventually erode. Stars burn and die, scattering elements that become planets and life. The universe itself moves toward transformations we cannot prevent. Our discomfort stems from how we measure time. For us, endings feel abrupt because our lifespans are brief. From planetary or universal perspectives, endings represent transitions. Dinosaurs didn't terminate life, their extinction opened mammalian opportunities. Ice ages didn't end the planet, they reshaped ecosystems. Endings weave into beginnings so completely they aren't truly separate. Human civilizations demonstrate impermanence as rule rather than exception. Troy's walls fell, Alexandria's libraries burned, Easter Island's statues weathered, yet each ending birthed new cultures, knowledge, and stories. Rome's fall didn't erase its influence. Egypt's decline didn't eliminate its monuments. Even collapse leaves seeds growing in unexpected directions. Impermanence doesn't mean erasure, but transformation. Personally, impermanence makes life vivid. Knowing our time is limited gives urgency to choices, relationships, and creativity. If we lived forever, would we treasure sunrises, songs, or conversations? Things matter precisely because they end. Endings press us to notice, value, and remember. This doesn't make endings easy. Matter or grief remains real, and loss feels heavy, but grief itself proves meaning. We don't grieve what we don't value. If impermanence brings grief, it also brings depth, reminding us that small moments participate in larger stories. Impermanence offers comfort by leveling everything. No empire endures eternally. No monument resists erosion. No star burns everlastingly. This truth, while humbling, liberates us. We aren't failing by being temporary, we're participating in patterns governing everything. Wishing for permanence opposes reality's fundamental structure. Accepting impermanence aligns us with it. When recognizing this, our relationship to endings transforms. We stop seeing them as fractures and start seeing them as continuations. Season endings begin others. Species endings make room for new rises. Life endings feed soil, nourishing fresh growth. Nothing disappears into nothing. It only shifts form. This understanding reshapes thinking about humanity's future. If our species is temporary like all previous species, our eventual ending isn't catastrophe but continuity. It may feel catastrophic to us, but to the planet it represents another page turn. Life will continue. New forms will appear. Fresh experiments will unfold. Even if we fear our absence, the story won't stop. Impermanence holds mercy. Mistakes aren't forever. Damage heals through time. Wounds close though scars remain. Earth itself has endured meteor strikes, mass extinctions, and volcanic winters yet continues. No ending has proven final. Even stellar death plants seeds for new solar systems. Impermanence ensures nothing locks permanently in place, always leaving room for renewal. Perhaps this explains why we tell stories with beginnings, middles, and endings. Without impermanence, stories would be endless, unchanging, without tension or meaning. We need endings to provide shape, to frame preceding arcs. The same applies to existence itself. Impermanence isn't meaning's enemy but its foundation. When placing ourselves back into cosmic context, this truth becomes clearer. Galaxies evolve, stars birth and die, planets form and fade. On those scales, our lives are moments. But within those moments, meaning becomes possible precisely because they're finite. We are sparks against darkness. Sparks matter because they cannot last. Accepting impermanence provides perspective, telling us not to cling too tightly, but also not to despair. Our lives, species, and civilizations will all end. Yet endings don't negate significance. They create it. In recognizing our temporary place within Earth's vast story, we find not diminishment but purpose. We are brief carriers of consciousness, temporary custodians of wonder, fleeting participants in the universe's ongoing experiment with awareness itself. Yet within those endings, continuations exist that we cannot perceive. The narrative extends far beyond our existence, and endings constitute essential components of its natural rhythm. When contemplating impermanence, we can allow it to comfort us, not by erasing loss, but by positioning loss within larger patterns, not by diminishing our efforts, but by revealing them as integral parts of vast interconnected flows. Permanence was never guaranteed. Change was, and change inevitably carries endings, not as failures, but as necessary story transitions. Throughout much of human history, we've convinced ourselves that we represent life's pinnacle on Earth. We reference our cities, languages, machines, and artistic achievements. We observe how we've reshaped landscapes, domesticated animals, unlocked atomic energy, and reached towards stars, calling it progress. We imagine ourselves atop evolutionary ladders, with all previous life forms climbing toward us, as though we were the predetermined destination. However, examining life's story more carefully reveals the ladder transforms into something entirely different. Not a straight upward climb, but a branching web, an endless unfolding of possibilities. Within that web, what if we're not the pinnacle at all, but simply a bridge, a temporary connection between what preceded us and what follows? The pinnacle concept feels seductive because it flatters human significance, suggesting permanence, finality, and completion. Yet, evolution doesn't work toward completion, but through experimentation, testing variations, discarding inadequate forms, while carrying forward successful adaptations. Dinosaurs dominated Earth for over 160 million years, far longer than human existence. Yet their reign wasn't a pinnacle. Trilobites filled oceans for nearly 300 million years before vanishing. If longevity or dominance proved evolutionary culmination, beetles or sharks deserve crowns more than humans. Viewing ourselves as bridges instead changes the entire framework. It acknowledges that our intelligence, tools, and cultures remain remarkable, while recognizing they may not represent the story's conclusion. Perhaps we constitute a stage in life's extended experiment with consciousness, a transition toward other awareness forms that will emerge after us. Perhaps we're not the ladder's top, but a temporary crossing enabling life to explore new directions. This idea can feel uncomfortable. If we're not the pinnacle, what purpose does all our effort serve? Why build, create, or strive? That discomfort stems from our habit of measuring value through finality. If the goal requires being the endpoint, then serving as a bridge feels like failure. But if the goal involves participation, then bridging proves no less meaningful than being destinations. Consider countless species preceding us. Photosynthetic microbes filled atmospheres with oxygen, preparing conditions for complex life. Plants colonized terrestrial environments, creating ecosystems animals could enter. Small mammals survived dinosaur extinction, opening evolutionary possibilities for our emergence. None of these life forms were pinnacles. They were stages. Yet without them, we wouldn't exist. Their contributions were bridges, and those bridges mattered fundamentally. Perhaps we're playing similar roles. Our intelligence may create conditions enabling new life forms to emerge even without our intention. Our planetary alterations may drive evolution in unforeseen directions. Technologies we build may eventually evolve into intelligence forms beyond us, whether biological, synthetic, or something between. In this sense, we may serve as midwives to futures that won't include us, but will carry traces of our influence. It's worth questioning whether the pinnacle concept makes sense at all. It assumes life possesses goals, directions, and endpoints, but life represents an open process, endlessly adapting. The moment we declare pinnacles, stories continue evolving. Declaring ourselves endpoints may reflect comfort-seeking rather than truth-seeking. If we're bridges, our value lies not in permanence but in connectivity. We link past to future, holding within ourselves life's deep history encoded in our biology, while projecting forward possibilities that will outlast us. Our art, science, technologies, and mistakes all become groundwork for whatever emerges next. This perspective also transforms how we think about responsibility. If we're pinnacles, we might imagine entitlement to use planets however we wish. If we're bridges, we might see ourselves as caretakers of passages. How we live shapes possibilities for what follows. Our actions affect not only ourselves but ripple forward into lives that will inherit Earth. Bridges aren't glamorous, but they're essential. They enable crossings, remaining temporary by design while connecting places that would otherwise be isolated. Seeing ourselves this way embraces humility alongside different forms of significance. We matter not because we're the final word, but because we're part of sentences that continue. When thinking of ourselves as bridges, impermanence becomes less threatening. Of course we'll end. Of course our species will vanish, as all species do, but in ending, we'll have carried something across, just as countless others carried across to us. Meaning doesn't derive from being eternal, but from being part of the flow. So are we bridges rather than pinnacles? Historical evidence suggests we are. Every dominant species before us believed, if it could think, that its reign was secure. None proved permanent. We won't be either. But bridges don't need permanence to matter. They need only to connect. In that sense, our place in Earth's story may be less about culmination and more about passage, less about being the ladder's top, and more about being one of its many rungs. Accepting this doesn't diminish us, but enables clear self-perception. We are extraordinary, yes, but extraordinary doesn't mean final. Extraordinary can mean transitional, and that too proves sufficient. Thank you for journeying with me through this extended exploration. If you've reached this point, you already understand where the story has been leading. We began with the thought that maybe humans aren't life's pinnacle on this planet. Not the final chapter, but something temporary, a phase in a story unfolding for billions of years. Now, as we bring this reflection together, I want to leave you not with definitive answers but with perspective. When stepping back sufficiently, humanity appears both small and extraordinary simultaneously. Small because our history remains brief compared to mountains and oceans, brief compared to stellar orbits, brief compared to universal deep time. Extraordinary because in that brief span we became aware enough to notice all of it, to ask questions, to imagine, to tell stories about where we came from and where we might go. That's what makes us unique. Not permanence but awareness. We know we're temporary even while struggling against that truth. We know species before us rose and fell, that civilizations crumbled, that our future isn't guaranteed. Still, here we are, gathering around words, thinking together about meaning. That act itself constitutes beauty. We often imagine meaning requires lasting forever. We observe monuments, books, songs, hoping they'll outlive us. We build, archive, and try preserving, but permanence was never promised and never required for meaning. Sunsets don't need eternity to be beautiful. Friendships don't need endless duration to matter. Lives don't need to avoid endings to possess value. Impermanence and beauty aren't opposites. They're partners. Applying this, thinking to humanity shifts the picture. Yes, we'll end, as every species ends, but that we existed at all, that we thought, created, and left traces in stone and story remains remarkable. We don't need forever to be significant. We need only to be. Maybe that's the real gift of seeing ourselves as temporary chapters. It frees us from pinnacle pressure, from illusions that everything led to us. Instead, it places us in the flow, part of the same stream as trilobites and ammonites, dinosaurs and birds, trees and fungi, microbes and mountains, part of stories too vast for any single species to own. That doesn't make our page meaningless. Think of how many billions of years Earth required to produce creatures who could reflect at all. Think how rare it may be for universes to examine themselves through eyes like ours. Maybe others exist, maybe none do, but that we're here now, noticing, suffices to make this chapter luminous. When stories move on minds, as they must, there will be other life forms, other experiments, other drafts. Maybe some will be intelligent in ways we cannot imagine. Maybe not. But our part will always have been written. We were here, we thought, we wondered. We left signs in stone, orbit, and code. We shaped Earth for better and worse. We weren't first and won't be last, but we were real, and that reality possesses its own beauty. The comfort in all this lies in knowing endings don't erase. They transform. Just as forests grow after fires, stars scatter elements after collapse, rivers carve new paths when overflowing, endings are passages. Humanity will one day be memory in Earth's strata, a layer of carbon, plastic, and fossils. But memory remains presence, and presence maintains meaning. So if you take anything from this reflection, let it be this. Being temporary doesn't mean being unimportant. Our chapter may be brief, but it's part of timeless stories. Beauty doesn't depend on permanence, but on presence, and presence we have. As you listen now, wherever you are, you're participating in that presence. You're part of the moment when universes become aware of themselves through us. That's not small. That's extraordinary. Thank you for spending this time here, for reflecting with me, for holding these questions in your thoughts. If you found comfort in this journey, I invite you to carry it forward, to notice how impermanence can bring meaning, to see yourself as part of something vast and ongoing.